the Africa, rule North Sea, biting them bites. Fast water swimming in the girls down in the guys. Fit now see, break you right by. OMG, Max 4, Robin C, yelling that night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the high. EC's alive, plus trust of those in my city life. Right? Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, try vibe, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Rock a definite rag. Side game time, Robin C, game time of the night. Under NYC.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove Live, episode 4 of this podcast. Really getting into the offseason right now as we got the key dates on the bottom. It's getting to the point where guys are going to be starting to accept or decline their qualifying offers. We're going to get starting to the owners' meetings, winter meetings, non-tender deadlines, all that fun stuff. And listen, guys, we got a lot to talk about. You see the topics on the side of the screen as well. We got so much to talk about, and we also got our trade proposals for Garrett Crochet, and we'll get to that in a little while. But let's say it up to Chris. And how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Hopefully everybody missed us both up on here on the screen talking Mets Hot Stove, conversating about the New York Mets. We've been having a little bit of technical difficulties with the StreamYard, so hopefully everything goes smoothly in this stream, but we can't stop technology at the end of the day. It should be a fascinating conversation, right? We're starting to see, more rumors come out regarding a bunch of different names and regarding the New York Mets. There's a lot of different avenues. If you've been paying attention to some of the videos that Rob and I have been dropping as standalone videos on our channel, there's a lot of different avenues and routes the Mets can take. And again, there's a lot of subjectivity also involved with these conversations. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but I'm really happy to be back on here talking Mets baseball with you all. Again, if you missed our videos that we dropped about Garrett Crochet respectively on each of our channels, make sure you go check it out. Smash those thumbs up buttons and let's get into it. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, we're ready to go. And, the Garrett Crochet situation is starting to, I wouldn't say heat up, but there's been a lot of interest in, trade proposals, rumors, information that's going out there. You heard about how David Stern is very interested in Corbin Burnes, which he was GM while he was with the Brewers. Not a lot of information about Blake Snell with the Mets yet. But there's so many options for the Mets in this offseason where they can go in so many different directions and have a solid offseason, right? They can have a great offseason, a good offseason. It's going to be it's going to be a monumental failure if they don't come out of this offseason saying it's a good offseason, right? It's very hard to have a bad offseason when you have so many other options other than the obvious Burnes, Soto, Alonso, and that seems like, the A-plus offseason. But even if you have, another combination of those guys, I think we're finding ourselves in a situation where we're in a very good spot because we can choose any 3 or 4 of those players, and any one of those combinations is a solid offseason. So, and that's what we're here to talk about, especially today when we get in news about Willie Adames. We obviously know Cohen's going to California to meet with Boris and Juan Soto. That is interesting. And obviously the question comes up, is it Soto or Santander? I guess it really depends on what goes on with the Soto situation. And we'll talk about Corbin Burnes. And of course, we have a very famous rapid fire at the bottom of the topic list. So we can really go into that just a little bit. Nothing crazy, right? Chris don't know any of the questions that I'll ask. And then obviously he'll come up with one, obviously. And we'll see how much fun that will be. But before we get started with the topics, guys, the Mets did hire an assistant pitching coach from the Yankees, Desi Drusko, one of those names. It's double D, D square. He's going to be, alongside Hefner. And as much as we can't stand the Yankees on this channel, their pitching has been pretty good, especially their bullpen. And obviously he was an assistant pitching coach with the Yankees, and under their pitching coach, they've been very successful in guys in the bullpen specifically, not necessarily starting, but they've still been very good starting. But Chris, I want to get your quick thoughts on Desi Driscoll, the assistant pitcher coach for the Mets. What do you think he's going to bring with Hefner to this Mets organization?
I honestly, I don't really know much about him. I think it's, proven that the Mets have had some success in terms of, getting that coaching tree in Queens, especially with Carlos Mendoza. Another name that was a Met manager before and went over to the other side, and Luis Rojas. There's a lot of speculation on what he's going to do as his next move as well. I believe he was serving as the Yankees third base coach. But no, I think that Desi is going to just provide another set of eyes for Jeremy Hefner. Obviously, we all know that Jeremy Hefner and the rest of this coaching staff from the 2024 New York Mets, they're going to be carried over to the 2025 season. There's not going to be any changes across the board. But I think a second set of eyes, in relation to the bullpen and the starting pitchers, especially with how much turnover, the pitching group is going to have, presumably from one year to the next, is really going to help out Jeremy Hefner in a huge way, right? We talk about, and one of our topics is going to be Corbin Burnes. Another topic is going to be Garrett Crochet. There's a lot of differences in terms of how this rotation could actually look like in terms of the personnel in 2025. And so Jeremy Hefner obviously is going to have to kind of get acclimated to that. And it's a lot, right? In terms of being in charge of an entire pitching staff and also bullpen, getting to know everybody's strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, they watch a ton of film. So I think just being Jeremy Hefner's, right-hand man, some of the information and the input that he has on a day-to-day basis from game to game. Obviously, Jeremy Hefner as well, right, was a key voice inside the head of Carlos Mendoza as he was making some decisions as it relates to the bullpen. And the bench coach, the pitching coach, has that responsibility as the game is going on to advise Carlos Mendoza what their thought process is. And obviously the end decision is in the hands of Carlos Mendoza. But I really do think that, like you said, the Yankees have had success, especially with their bullpen, right? The bullpen, in terms of their success rate under whatever coaching staff they've got going on over there in the Bronx, has been successful. So again, I like this hiring. I would be lying to you all if I knew anything about the guy. But again, I really do think that the primary goal is just going to be that second pair of eyes for Jeremy Hefner. So I'm excited, and we'll see what's in store for this team in terms of the pitching aspect.
Yeah, and if the Yankees want to keep on giving down our quote unquote hand-me-downs that they usually give, that they've been giving us, we got a manager of the year finalist, and who knows what Desi can bring to the table when it comes to the pitching aspect as a coach. So, thank you, Yankees, because you kind of made decisions that, helped the Mets. But again, we'll see how that goes. Again, we don't know much about him except that he, just like we didn't know much about Carlos Mendoza, except he was a bench coach. You didn't know his personality. You didn't know, how he would manage in game. You've seen it a couple of times when Aaron Boone got thrown out every other day, the last couple of years, and he was the bench coach. But other than that, we didn't know these guys, and we don't. We know what Mendoza is now. We don't know what Desi is, but he might be a big part. He might be the secondary eyes that you might need that Hefner might have missed, and that's always important, right? It's always better to have 4 eyes than 2 eyes in situations when you're trying to make a staff better. And we all questioned Hefner throughout the last couple of seasons as he continues to have a job through different regimes. And we'll just see, right? It's a good start, right? I do like that they changed up the staff a little bit, the coaching staff a little bit. So it brings new eyes, a new voice in there as well that, it could be status quo. And I'm not saying anybody will get lazy, but it's still interesting to see that they're still bringing, new faces in, which I like in a coaching staff as well. So, all right. So let's get down to the topics, guys. The key dates, just so we can bring that up really quick. The qualifying offer decision for the players is November 19th. The owners' meetings is November 19th to the 21st. The non-tender deadline is November 22nd. I wrote the non-tender deadline twice. I forgot what the other one was. But But winter meetings is the December 8th to December 11th, and the Rule 5 draft is December 11th, the last day of the winter meetings. So that's key dates that you guys need to know and we need to know, especially if we're going to do a ton of shows during that time over a month span, and there's going to be a lot to talk about, right? I don't believe anything big is going to happen, Chris, until probably closer to the winter meetings. If not the winter meetings, I think this is going to be a crazy winter meetings, and I think there's going to be a lot of deals done in the winter meetings. Again, maybe so, maybe not. Maybe I don't think it's going to be slow. I think there's been a lot of talk about it being slow. But you know what? Right out of the gate, once free agency got off and running 5 days after the World Series, we heard about the Mets' interest in Willie Adames. Now, you can take it for what it's worth. And, what was it? Mike Rodriguez was the one that came out and said it on X about the Mets being interested in, quote unquote, giving them an offer, which I don't think anybody believes that there was an official offer. But there was interest because multiple reporters said there's interest with Willie Adames and the New York Mets, and he's willing to move to second base or third base in particular, with Willie Adames. So let me get your thoughts on this, Chris, because I think we didn't really have a show since this basically almost came about. I really talked about it on the last show when you weren't with us, but what are your thoughts about Willie Adames overall? Do you think it has something to do with the Pete Alonso situation, why that might be a plan B if Pete Alonso doesn't work out? Or what is your thoughts on that so far?
Yeah, I think it definitely is a backup plan. Obviously, this is a name that's very familiar to David Stearns. I think we both dropped videos on Willie Adames on our respective channels. I definitely talked about Willie Adames. And I know the notion for a lot of Mets fans is that, they're kind of freaking out, right? Because this is a name that we really haven't heard or expected to be linked to this offseason. And everyone wants to sort of, lose their mind, so to speak, when nothing concrete really is out there, right? We've heard the reports. We've heard Heyman, basically state it hasn't even progressed to a rumor yet, right? It's just a strong topic of let's throw the Mets out there and let's throw a respective free agent out there to get the biggest rise out of a fan base that we possibly can. But you know what? As I dive into it, I understand that a lot of people are worried about the transition over from shortstop to third base for Willie Adames in that scenario. There's also some room for him to play second base, even if it comes down to it, depending on what happens with the outfield situation, depending on what happens with Luis Angel Acuna in this, trade season that is going to be upon us. And obviously Jeff McNeil as well, if they're going to shop Jeff McNeil this offseason, which as much as we would like, I don't think it's going to happen just because of the lack of potential trade partners that would be willing to take that on. And so again, it is a lot of different avenues. It's a whole merry-go-round situation as you relate and you look at this infield going into 2025. But you know what? This is a definite backup plan B, perhaps even a plan C, as I mentioned, if the Mets, see Pete Alonso walk and they don't sign a guy like Christian Walker, who's basically the only option in my mind to replace Pete Alonso externally via free agency on this market. This is a decent plan C. I mean, with the production that you've seen from Willie Adames over the years, not only defensively outside of the 2024 campaign, but offensively, this is one of the best power hitting infielders that the market has to offer right now. And I understand that the drop off was very steep in terms of the defense that we've seen from Adames at shortstop in 2023 and 2022 versus 2024. And I understand that there's some skepticism in terms of how he will transition over to third base in that scenario. But, being an infielder myself, I know you were an infielder for, many years during your playing career. It's kind of easy, right? When you talk about position changes, which seems to be the common theme for the New York Mets anyways, when you talk about Jet Williams, getting some outfield time and seeing where he could fit into this organization if he remains a New York Met in 2025 and beyond. And the same thing can be said for a bunch of other guys, Ronnie Mauricio, namely playing some second base and third base as well. We don't know what his position outlook is going to be. Guys change positions all the time. And usually the shortstop is the most athletic person on the field. He's the captain, and you see that to a T with Francisco Lindor. So shortstops or any middle infielder, really, they are obviously, it's going to be a learning curve in terms of the angle and the exit velocity off of the bats. in the hot corner. It's called the hot corner for a reason. But you would have to believe that it's an easier transition for these types of players to go over to third base than vice versa. If you put a third baseman and you try to move him to shortstop, it's probably not going to work out for you just, as well as a shortstop moving to third base. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. I get it. It's not the most efficient in terms of the defensive outlook. And we know the Mets have prioritized defense, especially up the middle under this new regime of David Stearns. But if you're selling me on this being a plan C, if Pete Alonso walks and if you're unable to sign a guy to a shorter term deal like Christian Walker, I'm going to tell you, I have no problems with it. No problems with it at all. The only other route I could see the Mets taking, and I don't think he's going to leave his team that he was currently on for all of his career, is Alex Bregman. That would be the only other viable option. As much as I do like Nolan Arenado, I know a lot of Mets fans out there are very skeptical about a potential trade of Nolan Arenado. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the Mets are willing to take on that contract. And some of the offensive decline we've seen from Arenado makes it not as enticing. But when you think about if, and this is a huge if, people in the chat, we are speaking about this as a hypothetical because we've heard absolutely zero information on Pete Alonso other than the fact that the Yankees have checked in on him. So if we get to a point in the season where Pete Alonso makes his decision and Willie Adames is out there for the taking, I'm not going to worry at all. Like I like that. I like the offensive production. Now, what I will say, Rob, with what you just said, that report, no disrespect to Mike Rodriguez, there is no way in hell I'm going to believe that the Mets have a 7-year offer out there to Willie Adames this early in free agency. There's no way that I'm believing that. So again, this hasn't even progressed to a solidified rumor yet. Let's everybody take a calm, deep breath. But again, backup option, man C, are we really going to complain with Willie Adames? I'm not.
No, and it's like, any big free agent is not going to sign until other free agents either accept or decline the qualifying offer. They're just not going to do that because it doesn't benefit them and it doesn't benefit their other union members. And again, with the Willie Adames situation, and Met fans, they basically laid an egg thinking that, Willie Adames is not better than Pete Alonso. We know that. It's not comparing one or the other. Right, I'd be shocked if Willie Adames and Pete Alonso were on the same team for the New York Mets this year. It's only a situation where people started comparing. Willie Adames is nowhere near Pete Alonso. It's not about that. It's about the fact that if you don't get Pete Alonso, or if whatever reason he gets a massive deal from the Mariners and he goes to the Mariners, right, and Christian Walker signs elsewhere, like you said, Chris, or even if Christian Walker's still on, as one of the free agents, and the Mets, David Stearns doesn't feel comfortable giving an older mid-30s guy a 3-4 year deal for a decent amount of money, maybe they will go that Willie Adames route and move Vientos, where they're probably more comfortable with Vientos going to first base. The guy, he's played in New York. You don't know what you're getting for Christian Walker going from Arizona to New York. You just don't know. So it's an option. And I think too many people are like, oh my God, they're trying to get Willie Adames. Oh, they don't want Pete Alonso. It doesn't have nothing to do with that directly. It's just that, again, I said it right when we started this show. What is the most important thing in this offseason? It's options. There's an option A, there's an option B, there's an option C. There's probably even an option D, E, F going down the line because there's so many quality to really good to great free agents just on the market. And that's not including the trades that can possibly happen as well that we're not even thinking of. Everybody knows about the Crochet possibility, but what about the other ones that are out there that we don't even know of yet? Right? There could always be a Tyrone Taylor, Hauser trade on the horizon. We don't know that. But just free agent wise, if the Mets just go the free agent route, we have so many options where you can just, mix it up in a bowl and pick 3 out of a hat, and you're probably going to have a good offseason. And that's what I think David Stearns is doing. He's keeping his options open, and a good GM or good president of baseball ops does that. And I think with Willie Adames, it's just that. It's just that I don't think he wants to, have his hands in his pocket where Pete Alonso might get a crazy deal, in the middle of the night from a team, and he takes the deal. And Stranger's like, oh damn, I didn't even get a chance to, have a counter offer for Pete Alonso, and he's gone. Well, wait, we talked to Willie Adames already. We know what he wants. Let's go to him. And then they have other options going that way. So I think that's the key when it comes to Willie Adames. I think it's a plan C option, to be honest. I think plan B is probably Christian Walker. And then obviously plan A is Pete Alonso. I think that's probably where it's going to go. But hey, listen, if Willie Adames is plan C, you can do a hell of a lot worse in the offseason than getting the guy, even if he's not as good as last year, you're still going to get around 25 to 28 home runs, around 90 RBIs, really good defensive guy. And again, the most athletic guys on the field are shortstops. They can move around second and third in particular. And I think he'll be fine. I'm not saying he's going to be a Gold Glover, but he'll be damn good at third base. And you'll be okay with that. Like, it could be doing so much worse. Prior to Vientos, we had a terrible Brett Beatty. We had Escobar. We had, look at all the guys that we had at third base prior to David Wright. It really has not been good. It's been a disaster, basically. And if you can get a guy that can be established like that, I take those numbers every day of the week, along with Alonso, or if not Alonso, a Nimmo and Alvarez and all those guys, and with Lindor as well, Chris.
Yeah, then that's what I'm saying, right? I think you just nailed it, right? It's a plan C, and if we're really going to complain about Willie Adames being a plan C just because he's moving out of position, then I don't know what we're doing here, right? You put guys and you bring guys in that have the talent, and then they make the adjustment. For me, I can see Willie Adames making an adjustment to third base, even though he's played 0 major league innings there in his career. It's just a simple feel for the game any infielder has. And the problem in terms of the Adames conversation for me is that, people are chalking it up to Pete versus Adames. And that's what people are, that's the route that they're taking in terms of having to view this conversation with. I have no doubt in my mind that the Mets are going to prioritize Pete Alonso. And honestly, I would also myself prioritize a first baseman, whether it's Alonso or Walker, over a guy like Willie Adames, right? I just would. But, plan C option, you can do a lot worse, right? It's not even a question with what you just said, Rob. But I will say, Mets fans, let's not act like Willie Adames has been a terrible defender just because he had he had a pretty big drop off in 2024. But prior to that, he was thought of as one of the better defensive shortstops in the league, especially in the NL, alongside a guy like Francisco Lindor and Dansby Swanson. And to sit here and say that he's been bad and think of him as a bad defender overall because we saw a down year in 2024, yeah, it could be a trend, but it also could not be a trend because we only have 1 year's of a sample size worth of data to assess that in terms of the errors and the defensive run saved category of his decline from 2023 to 2024. Again, a lot of what ifs, a lot of ifs here, but I mentioned it in my video. If you are going to sell me a situation where Pete Alonso walks, where you can't get Christian Walker in the door, maybe Christian Walker signs elsewhere, you got to move Mark Vientos to first base as a filler before Ryan Clifford is, ready to come up. And by the way, I know that a lot of Mets fans don't want to admit this or even see it happen, which I have no idea why. We were talking about Mark Vientos possibly being a DH for the New York Mets in 2024 before the season started. And to say that you don't want to see Mark Vientos transition to a DH, right? Not even full time, just maybe splitting his time between a position, whether it's first or third, and a DH spot, because it's going to stop his progression as a fielder. I'm not sure I really buy into that. I'm not sure if you buy into it at all either, Rob. But if you do, please let me know if you do, because I see a lot of people when the idea is thrown out there stating that Mark Vientos could also just be a DH for the New York Mets. He's been offensively proven already in 2024 for us to be comfortable with that. Would you do that in any case where you can bring in a third baseman and you can retain either Alonso or get Walker and you move Mark Vientos to DH? Would that entice you at all or not really?
Well, I see it as this. If Willie Adames is willing to move to third base and you can get him for a pretty good deal and not something crazy and still land Pete Alonso, I mean, that's a formidable lineup right there. like, you probably have one of the better defensive infields in baseball. And, you got a 30 home run guy in Vientos who, won't, could play first base every now and then, give Alonso a day off, put him at DH, you can move it around a little bit. But I mean, maybe that's a plan D. Maybe it's like, hey, if we can get Alonso on a 3-4 year deal for a lot of money AAV and still sign Willie Adames, just think of that infield alone with Vientos at the DH spot. And that's not I don't think that's considered. I don't think Vientos will see that as a slap on the face or anything like that, because he's still going to be on the major league team. They want his bat. Vientos is on this team because of his bat, and his defense was pretty solid. Like it wasn't. I mean, he had his moments, but he was really solid. So look, if you tell me that it's Adames, Alonso, and I don't know, Burnes, I mean, you didn't get your outfielder, and that's interesting. But maybe they really believe Gilbert can be the right fielder or the center fielder, something like that. Or even put Gilbert in right field and maybe do make Tyrone Taylor your everyday second center fielder. I don't, you can go a lot of ways with that, but maybe that's a possibility. Maybe that's what he's thinking, right? Because there's been a lot of talk about Pete Alonso possibly getting like a 4-year deal with a high AAV. And I don't listen. If we can get Alonso on, a $30 million a year deal with 4 years, I jump on that in a heartbeat. And then you still have so much room to improve your team. And if David Stearns likes a guy like Willie Adames, how can I say no? Right? How can I question David Stearns when he's been, absolute money with decisions like this? And again, he has to spend.
Yeah, no, and you can, but the thing is like, it's not just third base that we can talk about Willie Adames with, right? It's second base too, depending on what happens with Acuna, depending on what happens with McNeil. Like, there's another position open up the middle with Adames and Lindor. Like, I would sign up for that too. But again, right, we talk about the defense. We have the sample size surrounding Adames stating that he is a good defender no matter what happened in 2024. Again, we'll see that progression, and it's kind of risky to make that assumption, I guess, if you're going to hand out a 6 or 7 year deal to Adames, like that one report stated. Again, I don't believe it, but I do think that Spotrac absolutely has him at a 6-year deal at the very minimum, given that he's only 28 years old. But as it pertains to Mark Vientos, this whole discussion surrounding Mark Vientos, it's awesome because he exceeded, right? He exceeded my expectations, not with the bat, because I always knew that kid could swing the bat and that he would have 25, 30 home run potential. That was never the concern for me. It was his defense. And he exceeded the early scouting reports in terms of what his defense and what he could provide defensively at the major league level. And yes, he did have his moments, but at the end of the day, right? You take a look at defensive runs saved, he was still a -6 in that category. So the statistics show that, yes, he was a good defender to the naked eye, but defensively, are you going to say, absolutely no way, 100%, we're not DHing him because, he's our third baseman, if the defensive metrics don't really show that he was an above average defender outside of what we witnessed with our naked eyes, right? So again, there's a lot of conversations here. There's a lot of assessments to be had. Assessing defense in, the majors with the statistics that we are provided is also really a crapshoot, I would say, because there's just not many efficient stat lines or stat categories that could provide the whole picture, I guess, of a defender, especially in the infield. But I just wanted to, drop that food for thought type of comment surrounding Willie Adames and the merry-go-round that you have to endure there if you brought him in. It's an important conversation, and I think maybe we might be spending a little bit too much time on it right now with how early the report is and these rumors are. But again, this is something that we maybe look back on in a few weeks if the reports get serious enough and kind of revisit. But that's kind of my initial thought process there with Adames and the Mets.
Well, it's, like you said, it's versatility. Right? David Stearns, you see the guys he brought in position player wise, they're versatile. They play everywhere. Like they can play multiple positions, and Willie Adames could do that. And I think that's key to why the Mets were successful last year as well, not just with the pitching that, was surprisingly good or very good. It was the position players playing everywhere, right? We were starting the season thinking that Nimmo was going to play center field. What he did a couple of times this year, you had Beta, you had Tyrone Taylor, you mixed those outfielders around all over the place. The infield, right? Jeff McNeil was playing everywhere. I know Lindor was always a shortstop, but it just seemed like the versatility, especially when he got into the trade deadline and got a little, further into the season, you've seen guys, move in different areas. And I think that's what he wants. He wants versatility. And if you can get that, why not? And he's a very good player. And give me very good players over somebody that might fit a quote unquote spot that might help you, like a Juan Soto. He probably can't play anywhere else but right field. So, even though Juan Soto is obviously a guy that we probably all want, but, I like the versatility. And again, yeah, we're spending a lot of time on it, but it's worth noting that the interest is there from the Mets. And early on in the offseason, you wonder why, right? You have to bring up that question of why are they so interested, or at least have interest in Willie Adames, when that was probably one of the guys that you probably wouldn't even have thought of with the New York Mets. So we'll see. It's early in the offseason. The owner meetings are happening soon. And, it comes to question, what if Adames is one of those options? But we have to wait and see. We got a long way to go until that happens. So, Chris, next option. Okay, Chris, I'm sorry. You going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, for me, the way I look at a baseball field, I know David Stearns, right, might disagree, especially his track record wanting defense. But for me, the three positions that you absolutely have to make work in terms of guys that have been there before and have played at those premier positions at a particular level is catcher, is shortstop, and is center field. The positions up the middle. Anywhere else in the corners of the field, second base, first base, third base, left field, right field, it's about acquiring talent. And the rest, these guys are major leaguers. They're athletic. They will make that transition. I have no doubt in my mind. So again, that's just the way I look at it. Feel free to disagree. This is why we're having the conversation. But up the middle, premier positions, fill those spots with guys that have done it and have done it successfully in their careers. The rest, bring me talent and it'll work out. I promise you.
Yeah, I mean, look what the Mets are doing with their prospects, right? Mauricio was shortstop. Now he's playing third or second. Acuna playing center field. Jet Williams, center field, second base, third base, all over the place. So, that's what they're trying to do because they're athletic enough to do it. And we'll see where that leaves us with Adames in the future. All right, so now we got Soto or Santander. Now, this is a weird topic because everybody's going to lean towards Juan Soto, right? Because of the talent, World Series champion, got the Yankees basically almost single-handedly to the World Series this year. But Anthony Santander is such a quality and really good player. And by the way, he plays a little bit of first as well if you need him to. If the Mets are going to go hard after Juan Soto, and if they lose out on him, do you think they will pursue Santander a little bit harder, or will they go after, like we just talked about, Adames a little bit harder, maybe a Christian Walker, and just, work around the infield a little bit more and figure out what you can do in right field, and that could be Santander or maybe a trade that we're not even thinking of. Chris, I'm not going to ask you Soto or Santander, but would there be a possibility that Santander doesn't sign before Juan Soto and he waits for Juan Soto since he's the second biggest outfielder on the market? Does he wait for Juan Soto? But if he doesn't, do the Mets jump in and say, you know what, we can't play this game with Juan Soto and the Yankees or Toronto. Let's go and get Santander.
I think no matter what, you have to wait for Juan Soto. I think you have to wait for Juan Soto. This guy is too big of a name, too talented, too generational, whatever word you want to describe Juan Soto with, of a player, not to wait for him. So if you have to wait and then you strike out on Santander and then you strike out on Juan Soto, so be it. At least we could say they put their best foot forward and they didn't panic just because, right, Santander was saying, I'm going to make my decision before Juan Soto, right? I don't want to see the Mets panic in any scenario. Now, again, I think the league-wide assumption is that maybe Santander waits for Juan Soto to sign, because just by the law of supply and demand, right? Juan Soto gets off the market. How many other free agent outfielders that have home run capability outside of maybe a Teoscar Hernandez are going to be out there for the taking via free agency? Not many. In Santander, right? This guy offensively is awesome. The power is awesome. The defense is another story. He's not really a great outfielder. And first base might be a situation where if the Mets really need it, and they don't go after Willie Adames and they stick with Vientos at third base, you could also plug and play Santander at first base, which is a great point by you. But for me, if you're asking me if the risk is losing out on Santander by waiting for Juan Soto, I'm willing to take that risk. I'm just going to state it in blunt terms. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I'm kind of in between here because I don't think Juan Soto is going to wait a very long time. I think the winter meetings is probably when they're going to make this decision. And because Boras has so many big clients, I think some of them are going to come off the board in the winter meetings. I think Juan Soto, there's only a certain amount of teams that are going to be going after Juan Soto, right? I think this whole Tani thing was a little stupid last offseason when it was clear it was only 2 teams, probably even one team that he was probably always going to, but trying to drive up the price a little bit more. In this case with Juan Soto, I think everybody knows it's going to be in the 550 to 650 range somewhere if there's going to be a back and forth with offers. And everybody believes it's going to be the Mets and the Yankees. People could say to Toronto all they want. I don't care if they back up the Brinks truck. He's not going to Toronto. I'd be shocked if he goes to Toronto. If he goes to Toronto, I would shut my channel off for a month. That's how much I believe he's not going to Toronto.
That would be a hard pill to swallow. That would be a hard pill to swallow.
Absolutely. I would just be shocked. I don't see a guy like Juan Soto who is the flair for the dramatics, loves the New York vibes. If he ends up anywhere on the East Coast, I think it's going to be in New York. I'd be shocked. And look, would I be a little shocked if it was the Red Sox or, Baltimore if the owners decide to go nuts? Maybe. But Toronto just does not make sense to me at all. He doesn't seem like a guy that would like Toronto. But who the hell knows? What the hell do I know? Who knows? But, it's Canada. Let's go Maple Leafs. Who really cares? It's hockey world. I know that's crazy to say, but, maybe I'm just an idiot. And most people probably agree with that. But, I don't see him going to the Toronto Blue Jays.
Shout out to any Canadians watching this, by the way. No disrespect.
Yeah. But yeah, look, obviously Juan Soto is choice number 1. I don't think the Mets are going to handcuff themselves with Juan Soto. And I think this is the reason why. And I know Hal Steinbrenner is going to California as well. And the winter meetings I believe it's in California anyway. So I think they're all going to be there anyway. But
I think it's in Texas, by the way. I don't think it's in California.
So, all right. So West Coast, close enough. They took a little detour. So to have Hal Steinbrenner and Steve Cohen going out there, clearly it's the race of those 2 guys. And I do believe the Mets are going to have the biggest offer. It's just a matter of, is Juan Soto going to take the most money? I believe he's going to. I don't think everybody's like, oh, if it's only $10 million more, $20 million more, he'll go back to the Yankees. No, this is the revenge year for Scott Boras. This guy wants to bank on every one of his free agents because of the debacle he had last year. I'd be shocked. Juan Soto's been waiting for this moment. He's already turned down a $500 million contract from the Washington Nationals prior to getting traded to the Padres. So this guy has turned down a ton of money. There's no way he's going to take less money just to go back somewhere. He's just not going to do it. And I think the Yankees and Hal Steinbrenner knows that. It's just a matter. I think it's preference. I think that even if he wants to go back to the Yankees, he's taking the biggest offer. And if that's the Mets, he'll go there. Again, it's across town, Chris. You know what I'm saying? I feel that. in my opinion.
But also in relation to that conversation, I said this on my live stream that I did solo, a couple of days ago, is that like this notion that the Mets have to quote unquote blow the Yankees offer out of the water is also just bogus, because like, yes, he has familiarity with the New York Yankees organization, right? We know that's an iconic franchise and organization. Nobody's denying that. But what can the Yankees offer him that is above and away better than what the Mets can offer him, especially when you look at the trajectory of the two teams, right? The Yankees haven't won anything, right? You talk about cementing your legacy. That's not really going to happen in pinstripes as much as it would if you come over to the Mets and help them win a championship, right? Juan Soto could go down as one of the greatest Mets, and he won't even be considered top 3 or 4 in the Yankees organization, if that matters to him. And that's a big if. But again, the decision is going to be driven by money. The Mets are going to have to outbid the Yankees contractually. I just don't believe in this notion that they have to blow the Yankees offer out of the water or else he's going back to the Bronx. I don't believe in that at all. But again, another point by Shea here, which is fantastic. And the reason why I say, you can wait on Juan Soto and you don't have to sort of panic for a move of Santander is that, worst case scenario, all of these guys go elsewhere, right? And we're talking about internal candidates and Tyrone Taylor and Drew Gilbert, and maybe if Starling Marte sticks around in 2025, which again, I would expect him and McNeil to, barring anything unforeseen on the trade market this winter. That's just how I feel personally. Not that I want those guys here, right? I would love to explore trades for them, but just taking a look at the market or lack thereof, they probably will be in Mets uniforms if I had to bet on it. But aside from that, a name that we'll talk about in the Crochet topic that we have is Drew Gilbert. He's going to make an immediate impact in 2025 and beyond. I know that there's some speculation in terms of question marks there surrounding Drew Gilbert, but I think a platoon of him and Tyrone Taylor would definitely be in the works if the Mets don't let go of Drew Gilbert. But also, I dropped a video on potential outfield trade candidates the Mets can go after should there be a situation where they need to fill in the center field spot externally, or just get a expiring contract or an outfielder on an expiring contract, right? A guy like Lane Thomas, a guy like Cedric Mullins that are entering their final years of their respective contracts. The Mets can do that, and they can go ahead and make that trade, which presumably wouldn't cost them a lot at all, given the age of those guys and given the fact that they are on expiring deals. There's ways to go about having, now we're talking about a plan D option in terms of the outfield if everything else, goes awry and it doesn't work out in the Mets' favor. So, listen, a lot of different routes. I know that a lot of people, myself included, will consider it a little bit frustrating, if not a failure, if one of Soto or Santander or maybe Teoscar Hernandez, I don't know what his market's looking like right now, he's going to get a big payday, is not in a Mets uniform, but it wouldn't be the end of the world, right? It'd be frustrating. It'd be disappointing given the hype that this Mets offseason has surrounding it, but it wouldn't be the end of the world because the Mets would still be able to field a competitive outfield, in my humble opinion, both offensively and defensively.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually. Like, I don't think it would be the worst idea or the worst option either if that ends up being one of the lower options of the offseason. I think Drew Gilbert is probably a big possibility when it comes to, if the Mets do believe that, obviously it depends on what happens with Marte. Like, I'd be shocked if Marte's not on this team again. Is he going to be a bench player? Is he going to be the right fielder? I mean, there's a lot to talk about. There's so much that can go down. But I think Drew Gilbert's going to be a big part of this 2025 team somewhere or another, right? He might be our starting center fielder, especially if the Mets get Anthony Santander or Juan Soto. Drew Gilbert, maybe he'll be in on one of our trade proposals for Garrett Crochet, and we'll check that out in a little bit. But, Drew Gilbert can be a guy that can play center field in 2025. He's having a really good Arizona Fall League appearance, and if he stays healthy and has a good spring training, why can't he make the team? The Mets don't have to spend money on center field. Worst case scenario, Tyrone Taylor is a stopgap for Drew Gilbert to get a couple of months in the minors, and then you bring him up. I think you can do that. So that's an option as well. So, but it's so early in the offseason. It's so hard to determine, what's the possibilities, because again, we don't know what David Stearns likes in the farm system. We just don't know that. Just because, a Drew Gilbert's in our top 10, top 5, and, Jet Williams is in our top 3, we don't know. We do know David Stearns loves pitching prospects, right? He doesn't like to trade them, right? That's been very well known. He said that. He likes to develop his pitchers in the minor leagues and develop them into the majors and develop it into a major league rotation, right? I'd be shocked if he trades, one, even multiple arms to acquire like a Garrett Crochet or somebody else that we're not even thinking of. So it's going to be very interesting. But again, I think everything relies on Juan Soto. If the Mets don't get Juan Soto, then we can really spread out the options a little bit and see what they're going to do. And it all depends on what interest they're showing right now, right? You would think they would show more interest in Santander than Willie Adames at this point, but it's so early. It's really hard to tell. We're just spitballing here because we just don't know, right? And we haven't seen David Stearns really cook in an offseason where he has a lot of money to spend, and he has basically a complete year and a complete offseason to really determine what he has option-wise going into the offseason. So we'll see. So the fun part of the stream, I know we didn't even get there yet. I know 46 minutes.
Let's get into it.
So we got a little special I want to call it, I guess we can call it a debate, right? If you watched my video or Chris's video, you probably had an idea of the proposals that we had on our channels in our videos. But for whoever didn't see it and is tuning into the live stream right now and might look at it later, we're going to put them up right now. I'm going to change the graphics a little bit. And Chris, we're going to start with yours first. And I'm going to put up the graphic right away. And then you can talk about it and we'll be ready to go. So here we go, guys. Chris, take it away.
Yeah, so this is my trade proposal, and I kind of wish you went first because there's a name in your trade proposal that, I simply don't want the Mets to part ways with. And when you take a look at Garrett Crochet, we know how talented he is, right? We know the intangibles that he has, right? He's tall, he's lanky, he has a high leg kick that makes it very deceiving for opposing hitters to get a grasp on and to see the ball coming out of his hand. But we also have to be realistic in terms of understanding that we don't have the full sample size worth of work from Garrett Crochet. We not only the innings in terms of what he's produced so far, in general, whether it's relief or whether it's via, being a starting pitcher, but also just as a starting pitcher, we've only seen one complete season from him as a starter. So I think that there are a lot of baseball media outlets, Bleacher Report, just a ton of, and even Mets fans as well that, really want to give away some of the more premier prospects that the Mets have to offer. And the other aspect and the other coin of this is that, yes, they might have to do it if they really want Garrett Crochet. When you take a look at the other teams that might be in on him, like the Boston Red Sox, who have about 4 different position players in the top 100 MLB pipeline. When you take a look at the Dodgers and the Padres, who seemingly always have good farm systems. But for me, I take a look at the pitching that you just mentioned in terms of David Stearns not wanting to let go of those premier pitching prospects that the Mets have in their farm system, or even when he was in the Brewers organization, same thing. And also the outfield prospects, or lack thereof that the Mets have in this farm system. It's few and far between. And we've been talking about outfield in terms of shoring it up. And if Drew Gilbert goes into, a season where he appears for the New York Mets at the major league level, what other outfield prospects are you really left with outside of a guy like Carson Bench, right? That's really the question. And I know that, spoiler alert, he is going to be in your mock-up trade here. But for me, right, I think any team is going to want to start with Jet Williams. And honestly, I have no problems with it. I know a lot of other Mets fans do. They like to think of Jet Williams as a quote-unquote untouchable. And, that certainly could be the case. But for me, especially looking at the wrist injury that he had to undergo surgery for, and just sort of how that might impact him, and just taking an overall look at how his power might translate to the MLB level, I don't think it will. I really am going out on a limb here and saying that I don't think his power will translate at the MLB level. Jet Williams is going to be a stud, whether it's for the Mets or whether it's for somebody else, right? But you have to also be fair in terms of the realistic asking price and the expectation that the White Sox have. I see Brett Beatty's name here too. I did say Brett Beatty because I do think that Brett Beatty has played his last major league game in a Mets uniform. I think that experiment is over, and I think that he needs a change of scenery. I think that he has the tools to still recuperate and have a great career, and I wish him the best of luck. But I think that this is a guy, especially in a situation where there's not much pressure to perform, where there's room for a bunch of development. That's the type of environment that Brett Beatty needs. And that's what the White Sox could provide him. Ronnie Mauricio, I really want to leave him out of any trades. I know that there's some speculation in terms of how he's progressing coming off the ACL surgery and that injury that he sustained, unfortunately, that kept him out of the entire 2024 season. You know, I really want to see him back in a Mets uniform. I do. But I take a look at what the GM of the White Sox, Chris Getz, was stating in terms of what trade package he's looking for in any trade or via free agency, and that is shoring up their lineup. In an ideal world, I would replace Ronnie Mauricio in this list with Luis Angel Acuna, because I think that highly of Ronnie Mauricio and his ability to be maybe even a five-tooled player at some point. We talk about his speed, his athleticism, his raw power, and his ability to hit for contact. I think that he is going to be a complete hitter in this league. He has some issues in terms of strikeouts and expanding the zone. I think he'll work that out. But I think that with what the White Sox want in terms of premier offense, in terms of the prospect capital that they want from any team, and you take a look at the offers that the Red Sox might put out there, I think that Ronnie Mauricio's name, if you're not including Drew Gilbert, is going to have to be there. And therefore, that's why I'm putting Ronnie Mauricio in there to get this deal done. Because at the end of the day, the Mets pitching staff, the rotation needs work. There's so much question marks. There's so much uncertainty. We don't know if Luis Severino is going to take the qualifying offer, right? It would be awesome if he did, but we don't know if he's going to go into free agency and want an actual longer-term contract, whether it's 2, 3, or 4 years. Jose Quintana is not going to be back, if I had to guess. We don't know what Sean Manaea's outlook is. We know who he's represented by, and we know the market for Sean Manaea is going to be vast, according to Scott Boras. So there's so many question marks with this rotation, which makes it a no-brainer to go after Garrett Crochet. But when I take a look at other mock trades, I think that what you have here, just because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different names, doesn't mean that it is more of a, I guess, competitive offer than some of these other mock trades that I'm seeing out there involving the likes of Jonah Tong, involving the likes of Carson Bench and Jet Williams, right? And I know that's going to be your trade package. I'll talk about that just a little bit. But if there's a world in my mind where you do not have to include Carson Bench or Jonah Tong, you do it, right? Carson Bench, we know he was a two-way player. He has gap-to-gap power from the left side. He can play center field, but I think he's thought of more of as a right fielder plus arm. And after Carson Bench, who do you have in terms of the outfield that you are confident in this Mets farm system outside of Drew Gilbert? It's pretty vast. It's pretty vague. And then also Jonah Tong, a very fast riser, as I said in my Garrett Crochet video that I dropped today around 5:30. Again, the link's in my description down below if you're watching this on my stream. Jonah Tong, 6'1", 180 pounds. He went from A ball to high A ball to even double A. We saw him across 3 different levels, and he succeeded in all 3 levels. Fastball is electric, 94, 95, 96, topping out at 97. The slider is awesome. He has some work to do with his changeup, but the induced vertical break that he has, the movement on his fastball, he's literally just straight over the top in terms of his motion. It's insane. Over 20 inches of induced vertical break. And for those of you all who don't know, above average is about 18 inches of IVB. So this guy knows how to spin the ball. He gets the movement and he has an electric fastball. I really do think that Jonah Tong could be a force for the New York Mets and sooner than some people think. And you take a look at the other pitching prospects in Blake Tidwell, already having Christian Scott and Brandon Sproat, who is the Mets' #1 overall prospect, according to MLB.com. That's a name that I would like to retain, and I would make that sacrifice in terms of the names that you see here. So this is my trade proposal for Garrett Crochet. I think that, yes, it is a lot, as some people are saying. I agree to that, but I don't think it is as much as some of the other trade proposals that we've seen. And I think the logjam in the infield primarily is the reason why I included the likes of Jet Williams, Ronnie Mauricio, and Brett Beatty. So that's my trade offer.
Yeah, I know people think it's a lot, but I think yours is a little less aggressive than mine. And the reason why is because I got 3 guys in our top 10, and you brought up the guys, and I'm going to put mine up right here. And here's the difference. And I also included, if necessary, Brett Beatty. And I'm going to tell you why. Because Brett Beatty is not going to stop a trade. All right? It's not. Davidson's not going to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're not giving you Brett Beatty as well. I drive Brett Beatty to Chicago on the south side in the bad area. I'd even stop at a red light just to let him out. Like, I would do that personally. But with my proposal, it's aggressive because I want Garrett Crochet, right? I don't, as much as I like Corbin Burnes, I'm worried about giving pitchers long-term deals with a tremendous amount of money. These guys break down. These guys get hurt often. And I know Burnes hasn't had a history of injuries, but, he's going to be on the older side of 30 now. That worries me. And a lot of talk with Garrett Crochet is he talked about this along with his agent. Where he gets traded, he wants to have an extension. That's the key right there, that he would love to have an extension with that team that trades for him. That tells me you're already going to buy out the 2 arbitration years that he has left when you trade for him. So that means you're going to add those 2 years of arbitration, crumble those up, throw it in the garbage, and you're going to get a little bit of a discount because you broke up that arbitration and thrown it out the window and given him that 2 years along with that contract. And he's only 28 years old. So he's under 30, and you can give him a 7-year deal where you might not even approach $200 million. You might, but you might not even approach it because it's an extension and you're buying out his 2 arbitration years. So, and with Snell, you're probably going to get him for $200 million. You're probably going to get Corbin Burnes for around $250 million. So you might be saving $50-60 million on Garrett Crochet. I know you got to give up some prospects here, but again, you have a logjam in the infield. And if you notice, I didn't put Ronnie Mauricio in there. So you still have Acuna, you still have Ronnie Mauricio. So Jet Williams, in my opinion, is expendable, right? And Chris talked about the lack of power he believes that Jet Williams has. I agree with that 100%. Like, I don't see him as a guy. Like, could he be extremely good? Absolutely. But how many times have we seen prospects get traded and end up being nothing? If they're even in the league anymore, they're good at best, maybe slightly under average, maybe slightly above average, right? Kelnick, he's on the Braves. He barely starts. Like, that's an amazing thing within itself. So I'm not afraid to give up prospects. I'm sick and tired of always, staying in the background and the Mets never pulling that trigger. It pisses me off in the offseason, and it definitely pisses me off at the trade deadline. At some point, you can't be afraid to pull the trigger. And if it's the guy you want, go get him. And that's why my proposal with Williams, Benj, and Tong, and possibly, if needed, Brett Beatty, why mine is so aggressive. Because if you want the guy, go get him. I want Garrett Crochet. Go get him. And you can probably save a little bit of money on the longer end of a long-term deal because of the extension, and it'll be cheaper than Snell or Burnes. And what I like about this, he had Tommy John in 2022, right? It took him 2 years to really get back into form, and the White Sox threw him right in the starting rotation. He was a bullpen piece, guys, before he was a starter. This year was his first year as a starter overall. 32 starts, 146 innings, right? 3.58 ERA. Very good season. I just love the fact that he has less miles on that arm than Snell and Burnes. That's what I like the most. And he's under the age of 30, even better. So my aggressive approach to this proposal is because of all the things I just said. And this team needs a real ace, right? Don't give me this Kodai Senga ace stuff. This is a guy that needs extra days off. This guy needs 6 days. This guy needs to, he's almost the Grom in where he has to feel 100% perfect to go out there on the mound. You can't be having a conversation every other start. Oh, does Senga need an extra day? Does he need, do I need is he going to be okay in this, 5 days going out there and pitching well? Like, I can't have a guy that I have to question every time he goes out on the mound. Not saying his stuff is not good, but everything needs to be perfect for Kodai Senga to work out on the mound that day. So with David Stearns already talking about having a 6-man rotation, give me a guy that I know that can go out there every 5th day and give me ace type stuff every day. And not worrying about, oh, does Senga need a 7th day? Does he need this day? Like, it needs to be perfection for him to be out on the mound. And not a guarantee that he's going to pitch great. And we forget, he was hurt the whole season. Why do we just assume Kodai Senga is going to be healthy going into 2025? We don't know that. And that's the issue, the other issue as well. We're talking about Kodai Senga, and I had a lot of conversations with Met fans throughout the comments over this offseason already. And it's only been, 6 days? Where everybody's like, oh, you don't consider Kodai Senga your ace? How can I? He was hurt last year. He pitched, 11 innings in total? That's not something that makes me feel confident to calling him my ace. And if you get Garrett Crochet, 1, he's damn good. He will be your ace. 2, it's a security blanket just in case Kodai Senga either is not 100% healthy or isn't the guy that everybody's expecting going into 2025. I'd rather have that short thing than a guy that was hurt all of 2024. So to put all your chips in the middle of the table on Kodai Senga is a bad thing to do when you don't know if he's going to be healthy. Right? This is a guy that thrown a tremendous amount of innings in Japan. And he's of a smaller stature. He's a guy that shows you he can't pitch every 5th day on a consistent basis. He couldn't even do that in 2023, let alone 2024, because he was hurt. Now, do you think they're just not going to baby him all of a sudden? Absolutely not. He's going to be frustrating because there's going to be days where even on his 6th day of rest, he might not feel good enough to go out there. And now you got to work a guy out of the minor league system to pitch one day. I don't want to deal with that stuff. My ace needs to go out there every 5th day, at the very least every 6th day, once in a blue moon. But I need him.
Confident in that out of Garrett Crochet, though, 100%, knowing what we've known out of his career? Are you confident in that? I'm not sure
but what in his career, though? That I'm glad you brought that up, because in this year, right, who did he play for? The Chicago White Sox, the worst team in baseball history. Right? If you're the White Sox or if you're Garrett Crochet, both that left arm is assets to the White Sox and himself personally. The White Sox don't want to get Garrett Crochet hurt, number one, because he's going to be a trade asset. On the other hand, Garrett Crochet, his left arm is his moneymaker. If you're Garrett Crochet, would you want to pitch more innings last year? Because he could have easily pitched 180 innings last year. How many times did he pitch only 2 or 3 innings? He pitched against the Mets. He pitched 2 innings, right? Lights out. So I think it's not the innings. Everybody's like, oh, he didn't pitch a tremendous amount of innings. Yeah, who would? I wouldn't want to pitch more innings for a team that's the worst team in baseball history. And the White Sox are going to agree to it because they don't want their trade value, his trade value, to go down because of an injury. So I think he's easily 170 to 180 inning pitcher guy, easily. And the reason why I say that, because he pitched 146 innings on the worst team in baseball, and he probably could have pitched a lot less if he wanted to. And I think he can get it up to 180 innings, no problem. So, and again, the bullpen thing was a White Sox decision. That wasn't his decision. So I think, the money is where the starters are. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think once he gets his contract, he's going to let loose, to be quite honest with you. And I think I'd rather get him pitching for the Mets and let him loose that way. And, maybe obviously early in the season, you're not going to overdo it and throw these guys 9 innings, 8 innings early in the season because you want to get them through the season. But I think Garrett Crochet is going to be fine. I just think he was pitching for a really bad team, and his left arm has too much value for the team that he's currently on trade-wise, and himself getting that big payday and doesn't want to get hurt before that. And how can you disagree with him?
I mean, yeah, it's an interesting, conversation topic. We're going to be having this conversation for a while until this trade actually goes down. There's no doubt in my mind that the White Sox are going to keep that graphic up 1 second. I want to make a point on that. Sorry. They're going to be rebuilding and they're going to be selling. So one thing that I saw here in the chat that was a great comment by, I believe, either Shay or Darren, the fact that you can use Dylan Cease in that trade from the White Sox to the Padres as a benchmark for potentially what the White Sox will be asking for out of Garrett Crochet. I believe in that scenario, they said in the chat, and I looked it up to verify myself, was prospects ranked number 5, 7, and 8 in the Padres organization at the time, with a throw-in, which would equate to Brett Beatty, as we're mentioning in both of our mock trades. Right here, the names that you have on your screen. Jet Williams is ranked number 2 prospect. Again, I'm going off of MLB.com and their prospect rankings at the end of the 2024 season that was released in August. You have number 2 ranked Jet Williams, number 5 ranked Carson Benj, and number 10 ranked Jonah Tong. And again, Jonah Tong came out of nowhere. And listen, it wasn't a long list of Mets prospects that had really great seasons in 2024. Brandon Sproat is one that comes to mind, and so does Jonah Tong. So when you mitigate and you potentially get into a scenario where you don't have to throw in a guy like that with, the necessity of pitching down the line in terms of continuing to add the youth movement to your staff, that's where I kind of went along with my mock trade. But go to my mock trade for 1 second, just for the viewers out there to get this description here. Jet Williams ranked number 2. Ronnie Mauricio, again, who has MLB experience, but, not enough to consider him not a rookie. When he comes back up, he will be a rookie, quote unquote, even though he's going to be 24 years old, I believe, next season. Ronnie Mauricio is ranked number 6 in the Mets farm system. You got Jonathan Santucci. I know I didn't really delve into him. That was the 2nd round draft pick by the Mets in the 2024 draft. He is ranked number 11th in the farm system, right behind Jonah Tong and Alex Ramirez, who also just needs a change of scenery. Only 22 years old still, had a really down year, hitting 210 in Double-A. I think that he could also provide a major league team with some value, but just it's not going to be with the New York Mets. He's ranked number 22 in the Mets farm system. So just for you all to get a little bit of an idea of both of our trade packages and where these prospects stand within the Mets organization. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, these are our proposals, and you would assume that a combination of these guys would be talked about with the White Sox going forward. Sorry about that. You would think, right? It could be players are totally different. We don't know, right? But if you notice, Chris didn't put any pitching prospects in his trade proposal. I put one, and it was the number 10th ranked prospect, Tong. So, I don't think David Stearns wants to put a pitching prospect in the trade proposal, but if he has to, I think he would go with Tong over probably even Vazel or Sproat or any of those other guys, Gamble, all those other guys in our top prospect list as well. And I think it makes sense to do that. Look, again, and I also added Brett Beatty if necessary, because they do want position players, and Brett Beatty's still young. All these guys are controllable, obviously. We'll see, right? I do think you're going to hear it starting to heat up a little bit more when it comes to Garrett Crochet and along with many other teams. Look, there's other teams that have probably better position player overall prospects than the Mets. But it's just a matter of what the GM gets from the White Sox is looking for, right? Is David Stearns going to be aggressive? Does he have, a relationship with Getz? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. We don't know. Sometimes that could be the case as well. We'll see. But I do think, Chris going the less aggressive route with the more players, but leaving out, pitching prospects is a way to go. And mine was a little bit more aggressive, given 3 of the top 10 prospects in our farm system. It could go either way, right? It depends on, do you give more, less ranks, or do you give more, higher ranks and be aggressive? I think you can go either way. Like, would I be disappointed in either one of our? I know you might be a little disappointed in mine, giving up that, but I don't think, if you get Garrett Crochet, maybe you won't worry about it too much, once the season gets started. But you're gonna question in your head, be like, oh shit, can Benj be a good player? Could Jet Williams be a star? Can Tong be a top of the line starter or even a mid-level starter? A lot of things you can question. I think if you can make your team better now, I think you got to do it. Like, how many more years, because we're not talking about, I brought this up in the last hot stove, Chris, how many more prime years you're going to have out of Lindor, Nimmo, let's say if Alonso comes back, right? You're going to have probably 3 years of their prime, maybe 4. You can't waste those away. These are long-term deals where you can't wait until they're 36, 37 years old and they're declining and say, oh, look, we got these guys now. Great. Here they are at 24 years old. And, it might not make the difference anymore. I think you have to really worry with these long-term deals. And if you're going to expect Alonso to get a long-term deal, say if he does stay with the Mets, you got 3 guys right in their prime years. And look, Nimmo's already hurt every year and already got hurt multiple times this year. Lindor had his best season as a New York Met. How many more are we going to have of those over the next 5 years? Maybe 3, maybe 4, but the core guys, you can't waste those away. And I think that's why bringing in certain guys that are already established that can help this team right away. You already got a lot of guys that have come up through your farm system that has, established themselves. Vientos, Alvarez, Acuna, we already talk about Nimmo. We already talk about Alonso. Those guys have been a big part of it. So they develop guys already. At some point, you got to bring in proven guys to help this core get to that next level while they're still in their prime.
No, I understand that and I get that and I'm completely on board with it, right? I mean, for me, when I take a look at like the starting package, and that's kind of what I was more so looking at. And I think some people just look at more names being involved in the trade and they think that my trade is a little bit more on the aggressive side. But I agree with you. I think that my trade proposal is less aggressive than yours when you actually look at the, capital that is going to the White Sox in either of these mock trades. I think that, for me, if you can get away with what I propose, then I would do that 100% more so than what you propose. But it's just like, when you compete with a team like the Red Sox that could blow anybody's offer potentially out of the water, it's like, how aggressive will Stearns get? And is there an asking price point when you're competing with the Red Sox or anybody else that David Stearns gets to a point where it's like, this is too much, it's not worth it in the end? That's also a conversation that we have to sort of talk about as well, especially with the free agents that are on the market that could also serve as your co-ace, if not your ace, above Kodai Senga. But yeah, no, I mean, listen, I'm not a quote unquote prospect hugger. If it's going to get the Mets a solidified arm in a rotation that has anything but, any position solidified, then I'm going to do that 100%. If that means giving up a guy like Jonah Tong, yeah, I would rather not do it, but I would do it if that means the trade 100% goes through. Same thing with Carson Benj. The only two names that I really don't want to include is Drew Gilbert and Brandon Sproat. Yes, you can replace Drew Gilbert with Jet Williams and still probably make something work. I get it. But I do think that Drew Gilbert will have more of an impact on the Mets sooner than Jet Williams will. And that's why I'm prioritizing Drew Gilbert, but also Brandon Sproat. I don't think that anybody's going to get Brandon Sproat no matter what, no matter whose name you throw out there. So again, we're talking about this. It's a fun conversation. It's fun to play GM. A lot of people are going to have different subjective thoughts, but that's exactly why we're talking about it. And that's the beauty of baseball. And that's the beauty of how tough David Stearns' job really is, because These are conversations to a smaller scale in terms of what he's actually having to take a look at and decide when he approaches the White Sox for a potential trade. So again, hats off to you, Mr. Stearns. We trust in you.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get up to the Corbin Burnes quickly, Carlos just said, Rob, please, you can't look at these moves based on Lindor, Nimmo, Alonso, Cora. We need to move past that. We're not moving past that. The only guy that might be moving on is Pete Alonso. So you're stuck with Nimmo and Lindor for the foreseeable future. I mean, we might be even older, much older by the time these guys' contract end. These guys, they're going to be here, and if Alonso does come back, those are three guys that are directly in their prime. Give you 3 to 4 years, regardless of if they have 5 years left, 6 years left, 7 years left of their contract. They're going to get older. So these guys are going to be here. So you have to talk about them when talking about these deals, because it does matter, right? I don't want to wait until, a guy like Carson Benj, who might be here in 2027 projected, right? That means Lindor is going to be 34, 33, 34 years old. Alonso, the same thing. Nimmo, the same thing, right? These guys could be out of their prime by then. Like, is that really going to help this overall team when these guys are breaking down? You can't get rid of them. They're here. So I think that's what you have to talk about, that, because it relates to it, and you have to compare it, and you have to put those together, because if not, it's not like Nimmo's a free agent and Alonso's a free agent and say we can go in a directly different path and Lindor's the core guy now. You can't do that. Nimmo's has a long-term deal, and Pete Alonso possibly could as well. So those three guys might be back on long-term deals together. And you're talking about a couple of more years of their prime. You got to take advantage of that before it's too late. And if you don't do it, you're going to have a lot of bad contracts on your hand and praying that your prospects are going to be stars and take over that mantle. There's no guarantee of that. So I think that's where you would have to go with that. And that's why I'm doing that. Well, yeah, Carlos, I understand that, but Nimmo is here. Alonso could be here. So you have to talk about that, because that's a possibility. All right, Chris, Corbin Burnes contract. I just want to get a quick idea of, what do you believe he's going to get? And because he's a David Stearns guy, do you believe that David Stearns might really be, obviously Crochet is an option, but this is why having an owner like Steve Cohen, anything's possible. And with Burnes and Crochet, obviously really damn good pitchers, and that option is available for the Mets either way. What do you see a contract looking like for Corbin Burnes? And do you think Stearns is, going to be quote unquote all in for Corbin Burnes?
I can't even tell you, right, what, Corbin Burnes and the AAV outlook could look like. I don't think it really matters when you take into account if Steve Cohen wants a guy and he, or David Stearns wants a guy and he's very adamant about it. I think that, pinching pennies over, what's a couple million AAV difference, it doesn't really matter. For me, what matters about Corbin Burnes is the amount of years that you're going to give a starting pitcher. The same conversation can be had about Max Fried. The same conversation could be had about Blake Snell, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of if you offer up a 4 or 5 year contract to Blake Snell or not, you'll hear a lot of differences of opinions in terms of Mets fans either want him or they don't want him. Same thing is, can be said for Corbin Burnes. The one notion that I really take issue to is taking a deep dive in terms of the strikeout trend with Corbin Burnes and some of the, I wouldn't even say deeper analytics to him, because there's this notion and there's this movement to sort of label Corbin Burnes as this regressed pitcher and that he's not this ace anymore, which I think is a load of just baloney. This guy's a stud, right? I mean, he posted a 2.92 ERA. He did just fantastic work for the Baltimore Orioles. Obviously, he has that familiarity with Stearns. He's an ace. And whether you give him a 5, 6, 7 year deal in the first couple of years of that contract, maybe even going on with given his age, the first 4 or 5 years, you are going to get premier production from Corbin Burnes, unless something like catastrophic via injury happens, right? Which you can never foresee anyways when you're giving out these types of contracts. And if you did try to take that into account, you wouldn't be giving anybody a long-term contract, right? But this is what these guys want. So the notion that Corbin Burnes is regressing and he's not an ace and we shouldn't pay him like one is a bunch of crap. I don't want to hear that. Now, it's also kind of interesting to talk about the Mets and this pitching sort of front, and the fact that you do have these names coming up through the ranks. And no, the Mets aren't going to rely on a completely youthful rotation. You still need that experience. But is David Stearns, and we've seen these reports as well. I mean, Jim Bowden, I know that he's a Mets hater. I know he's not very credible sometimes. He does have some ins, being a former GM, I believe, himself. But he's saying the Mets will be all in on Corbin Burnes. That's David Stearns' guy. But when you take a look at David Stearns and his approach to the rotation, he hasn't really been willing throughout his tenure as, the Milwaukee Brewers GM or the president of baseball operations for this past offseason for the New York Mets, a willingness to give pitchers long-term deals. So I'm very curious what that working dynamic is going to look like with David Stearns and Blake Snell, Max Fried, and, Corbin Burnes. It's going to be very interesting. So I can't even tell you what AAV, I'm looking for Corbin Burnes to get. I would be wary about an 8-year deal for him because I think 8 years is just a little bit excessive. But if you're going to sell me on 6, maybe even 7, I could be on board with that. I would obviously rather have it be 6 years. I think anybody would, especially if you're talking about a starting pitcher. But, the AAV, I haven't even taken a look at a Spotrac. I'm not sure if you have, Rob, in terms of what they're evaluating him as, the overall contract value and what he's scheduled to make per year. But I know it's going to be a lot. And we'll see if David Stearns is actually that aggressive in the pitching market. When you take a look at, you could go after Garrett Crochet, who's 25 years old, has 2 more years left on his deal. You could go after Max Fried, who's probably going to be in on maybe a 4-year deal. Same thing with Blake Snell going on 5 years. Like if there's any contract and any guy out there via free agency that's going to get the longest term contract, I would assume it's going to be Corbin Burnes. And that's just not up David Stearns' alley historically.
Yeah, it's hard to look historically at David Stearns' track record because he never had the means in Milwaukee. There might have been a guy he really wanted, in free agency, and just the owner wouldn't be willing to pull the trigger on a long-term deal. So, I don't know what Stearns is going to do with them means now. Like he might really like Corbin Burnes and saying, hey, I got the money to do it. I have the okay from the owner. So why not do it? I think we're looking at the 6-7-year deal, 8-year deal as like, oh my God, too much for a pitcher. Here's what I look at. If you can get 70% of that contract, the years that you have been getting for Corbin Burnes, you take that every day of the week. Right? Do you think the Yankees cared about the final 3 years of CC Sabathia after they won the World Series? No. Right? I think you have to look at it in many different ways, right? If the Mets win a World Series over the next 3 to 4 years and, Lindor's last 3 years of his contract and Burnes' last 3 years of his contract is a complete disaster, you're going to look back at that World Series ring and be like, hey, they helped us get that. Right? I don't think you can worry about the last couple of years of that contract. It's the first 4, in my opinion, that really, really matter, especially for a pitcher, right? I think that usually really matters to me. And I think owners and GMs look at it that way too, right? Yeah, the back end of the contracts is – how many back end of contract deals in Major League Baseball with long-term deals have worked out? Probably not many. So you can't shy away from it, especially if you can't trade for Garrett Crochet. Right?
Well, if you're saying the first 4 years, then does that make Max Fried or Blake Snell a better option in your mind?
Well, that's what I was just going to bring up, right? Blake Snell, the 5-inning genius here is a guy that, he'll throw you gems, but he's not going to give you a lot of innings. I mean, he'll throw a no-hitter every now and then, but he'll give you mostly 5 innings most of the time. Would you take that 4-year deal? I don't think Blake Snell's getting a 4-year deal. I think Blake Snell's going to get a 5 or 6-year deal. I think somebody's going to overpay for him big time. But Max Fried is a guy you can probably get on a 3-4-year deal. That's a guy where you can be like, oh man, he's so good when he's healthy. But that injury concern, right? You don't have an injury concern with Corbin Burnes, right? I think that's one thing that you can almost take to the bank mostly and say, all right, this guy has been a workhorse. I can get him. And I can trust the fact that in 4 or 5 years, he's still going to be damn good. And then I'll worry about year 6, 7, or possibly 8 later on. But I think Blake Snell only scares me because I don't trust him where I don't feel like he'll go that extra mile if you need him. I don't think he will. And that worries me a little bit. I don't think his motivation is there, even with a contract, to be quite honest with you. And with Max Fried, I think there's too many injuries of the very recent, past that scared the hell out of me. Right? Again, I just talked about Kodai Senga not being trusted as our ace. How can I trust Blake Snell, who doesn't want to pitch past the fifth inning, and Max Fried, who's consistently hurt the last couple of seasons? I can't trust that. So I can't throw Senga under the bus with that and not throw those two guys under the bus. I think the best bet is going after Crochet in a trade or signing Corbin Burnes for a long-term deal, even if you're not comfortable with that 7th year, possibly 8th year, maybe option. At least you're going to get at least half that contract, the best of Corbin Burnes. And I think that's where I think Davidson is ultimately going to lie, is if you can get Crochet for what you might want, maybe a less aggressive deal like you did, Chris, or aggressive deal with me, and knowing that you'll save money on the long end with Garrett Crochet, with that 7 years, he'll be younger than every other pitcher that's on the market after that contract's up. So you might get more years out of Garrett Crochet in the long run. So in my opinion, Corbin Burnes, of course I want him. But we don't know how Davidson is going to work with the money he has, right? If he spends big, well, he was always itching to spend, but never had it. Now he does. So we'll see, right? My dream offseason is Corbin Burnes and Juan Soto. If that happens, then David Stearns loves to spend money. And now we'll be talking about that going forward, about spending money and add into payroll. So in my opinion, I'd rather spend more on Corbin Burnes than the question marks that is Max Fried and Blake Snell.
I will say, to be fair to Max Fried, like, he's since 2020, he's only not pitched 100 plus innings in 1 year, which was 2023. 174 last year, like 150 something in 2022, and then 160 something in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So the injury concern is there, but again, if you're like not concerned about that with Garrett Crochet, then I don't think you could be concerned about that with Max Fried either, to be fair.
Well, Max Fried wasn't Tommy John. Like Tommy John, it seems like after the second year, everything's fine. I think Max Fried, that's not technically a Tommy John issue, always worries me with shoulder, legs. That worries me a lot more because Tommy Johns, they can fix it. You're going to be good within a year or two. I guess that's the way I'm thinking, but I don't know. Max Fried scares the hell out of me, to be quite honest with you. But
would you give him more? Would you prioritize Blake Snell or Max Fried? I'm going Max Fried. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I would go Max Fried because if he's healthy, he's probably one of the best pitchers in baseball. To be quite honest, I don't trust Blake Snell. I don't trust him on the mound. I think he'll give the ball in the 5th inning, regardless if he has a no-hitter or not. He's just gonna be like, here you go, I'm done. I just don't trust him. So yeah, Max Fried, I go over Blake Snell every day of the week. So rapid fire time, Chris. I got one question for you. There's one guy who we haven't talked about in this topics, Roki Sasaki, who's been posted by their Japanese team. All right. Now, it would be silly if the Mets aren't in on him. They obviously are. They've been scouting him for a year and a half now, right? He's not going to cost a lot of money because teams have to use their international signing bonus money. Roki Sasaki, your opinion about him, and do you think the Mets have, I would say, more than a 50% shot of getting him from Japan?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not the biggest international free agent connoisseur when it comes to the Mets and that sort of pool, but I think they have a massive deal already out there for Elian Pena, if I'm not mistaken, which they would most likely, to make the money work, have to rescind if they are a serious contender for Roki Sasaki. I hate to just say and repeat the same information that everybody else is repeating, right? And saying in terms of him going to the Dodgers or just going on the West Coast, whether it's the Mariners or the Padres. But I really do feel like that's probably where it's headed. I mean, John Heyman, as much as he drives me crazy, he's basically saying Dodgers are bust at this point. He gave the Padres a shot, but he said everybody else that's on the playing field is basically has no chance. That's what I took from John Heyman, right? But Again, on the conflicting side of things, Jeff Passan, when he broke that Sasaki was getting posted, said that it's too premature to write in the Dodgers as the shoe-in favorite. So who the hell do we trust? Again, rumors are rumors for a reason, as we stated before. And we're just kind of basing off of, what we've heard through the grapevines. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine the Dodgers not being active there. It would make a ton of sense. It would make a ton of sense for Sasaki to go over there to play with the likes of Ohtani and Yamamoto. And obviously the situation is similar in terms of the Dodgers being favorites, but it's not because, he's 23 years old and he hasn't really met that threshold to get a long-term deal. You have to basically give him a minor league deal with that healthy sign-on bonus that's coming from your international free agent pool money. But yeah, I mean, it would be foolish for the Mets to not be in on Sasaki if it meant they had to pull the offer for Pena to go after Sasaki. I think that everybody at this point would probably tell you that, yes, you would do it because Pena is not going to be making any contributions to the Mets organization and the Mets major league team for many years, given his age, whereas Sasaki is going to make a contribution right away. And we're reinforcing the philosophy of the Mets having so many holes in their rotation as it currently stands in 2025. So it makes sense, but are we going to really sit here and talk about this guy as if we don't believe he's going to the West Coast, particularly the Dodgers? I mean, do you think there's any world where the Mets get to sign him, Rob? Because I'm not so confident at all. I really do not think so.
I'm not really sure because I thought the Mets were on the verge of getting Yamamoto. Like they were the biggest offer until the Dodgers match, and Yamamoto, put the phone out of service and not let the Mets challenge it or make a bigger offer. So I only brought it up as a rapid fire question only because I feel like the Mets are going to be heavily involved, and we'll see if David Stearns can work his magic. But it seems like he's going to be on the West Coast, and you think the Giants might have a chance as well, since, they have a huge Asian population, and that's been talked about a lot as well. I don't know. Like, am I going to be, going, crazy if I hear a little bit of rumors about the Mets and Sasaki? No. I'd be shocked if he's a New York Met, right? I'd love to have him, and you might save a hell of a lot of money in your rotation if you can land him. But I think he's going to be on the West Coast. I think it's going to be very hard for the Mets to win over that when he's basically on the opposite side of the world in New York. And to fly back to Japan, you got to go way all the way on the other side. So I don't know. I mean, I guess location might matter to him. It might not. I don't know, right? These Japanese players like to be closer to home. California is closer to home to them. So we'll see. Again, I'd be ecstatic if we got him. But I think we got to, ease our enthusiasm with that until we really get more information coming out. Because the way the Mets were pursuing Yamamoto, and Sasaki is probably quote unquote better than Yamamoto in all indications he might be better. We'll see, right? He's younger. That helps, but I just don't know. I just thought it would be a good question to ask on the rapid fire, but we'll see. I think if you get Sasaki, I don't think we're out on Burnes, Snell, or Freed, to be quite honest with you, because he's not going to cost you a ton of money. So that would be a great sign if we do get him, because I think they can still go out and get one of the bigger names on the market.
I see Luis Castillo's name being thrown out there. I don't think there's any world where Castillo gets traded. I think the Mariners are still trying to compete, so that'd be kind of foolish for them to let go of their best pitcher. Maybe some other names that they have to offer potentially. I don't know. That's always kind of been like over the last couple of off seasons, particularly last off season, we were wondering if they were going to let go of any of their starting pitchers. Like that was the sort of idea surrounding the Seattle Mariners, and they haven't done it for the most part. So I think it's a little bit far-fetched to talk about Luis Castillo in terms of a potential trade. You never know. But with that rotation that Shea was kind of throwing up there when talking about Corbin Burnes or Blake Snell, Manaea, etc., that's like 24 plus 22, is 40 something plus 35 for maybe like a Blake Snell, or like 30 for Blake Snell. It's like $70 million you're allocating to just 3 starting pitchers alone, which gets into a little bit of a gray area when you talk about having to allocate for, Juan Soto and his potential AAV plus some other relievers. So again, the Mets aren't really tapped out on money, but in relation to, the Sasaki conversation, it would be nice because, again, you can get him for cheap, just like the Angels did with Shohei Ohtani when he first got into the league, and that would make things so much easier. And you have a formidable pitcher, a phenom, so to speak, right in the middle of your rotation, which would be awesome. But I just don't think that there's any way the Mets are going to be, and it's not anything to do with the New York Mets. It's just the market of what you just said, these players preferring to go to the West Coast. And again, you have an organization with the pedigree of the Dodgers. You already have 2 other Japanese players in Ohtani and Yamamoto over there. It just makes perfect sense, for him. So, if it happens, fantastic. I mean, I'll be over the moon ecstatic, but am I going to hold out hope for Roki Sasaki to be in a Mets uniform? Absolutely not.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be a great question to ask since I left him off the topics list and just throw that at rapid fire time. But all right, guys, so Mets Hot Stove episode 4 is in the books, right? We went through Adames, we went through Soto, Santander, we talked a little bit about Alonso, we talked our proposals for Garrett Crochet, trade proposals that can go to the White Sox. Chris, less aggressive approach, more players. Mine, less players, but more aggressive approach going forward. So if you want to look at the proposal again, either watch back the Hot Stove or check out our videos that we did about Garrett Crochet exclusively, and we'll have our trade proposals there. So Chris,
one question for you, Rob, before we wrap this up. One question for you. I just thought of it. In terms of a guy that has gone through injury concerns, but maybe more up the alley in terms of a more efficient deal that you could potentially get him for because of said concerns, and it could pay off for you huge. I saw this name being floated in the chat, and I really like it, especially with the way that he performed in the playoffs. Walker Buehler. I would pay attention to Walker Buehler and what his market is. I know that what you said in terms of, not leaving Kodai Senga out to dry with adding injury-prone guys to your rotation is a concern that you have, but would you take a shot at Walker Buehler if he's willing to accept a shorter-term deal? Just a quick question for you.
100%, because second year coming off of Tommy John, I think he's going to be damn good. I have no problem with that at all. I wouldn't. I feel like Tommy John is a surgery now, especially the second year where these guys feel like themselves again, and he pitched extremely well in the playoffs. So give me him on a 3-year deal. I take that. Shoot, if he wants to take a 1-year deal with a opt out in the second year, I even do that. I would have no problem with that. So Walker Buehler, he can be wearing orange and blue, and I'd be excited about that.
Boom. There you go. I agree. I mean, I just wanted to gauge what your thought process was, but I agree. I like Walker Buehler a lot.
Yep. So, all right, guys. Mets Hot Stove episode 4 in the books. Make sure you hit on that like button, guys. Subscribe to the channels. If you're on X, head over to the channels. Subscribe to the channel as well. We'll do another show probably later in the week as more news comes in. Owners will be meeting in their standard meetings of the offseason and all that fun stuff. That's when you hear a little bit more about things going on, maybe more trade rumors when owners get together, as the GMs will probably be there too. So Chris, final thoughts, and let everybody know what's going on with your channel.
No, I mean, it's awesome. This time of year is awesome. There's nothing else better other than if the Mets were actually playing. But again, Mets off-season content, we are going through the process. It's so fun to talk about an offseason where we know the Mets are going to spend, but we have no idea which avenue they go down. And there's a lot of content to come with it. Again, trying to do regular content videos as soon as we hear reports. I love to do my Mets news in a minute segments as well to give you all the latest scoops that we're hearing in a minute or less. So make sure you pay attention to the shorts as well as the videos. Again, smash those thumbs up buttons. I definitely appreciate it. Both channels, subscribe to both channels. We got you covered all off season long. It's going to be a marathon, not a race. And that's kind of how I will assess this free agency. I think it's going to be no different than last offseason when we were kind of ripping our hair out in terms of some of the decisions that needed to be made, particularly surrounding Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto. And it was kind of this waiting game. I would expect the waiting game to commence as well between certain guys, and headlining the outfield group being Juan Soto. We'll see when he makes his decision. You see the key dates here. I appreciate all the support on the channel. Appreciate all the support on all the content that we do. I do on this channel, Mets and Knicks. And I appreciate you, Rob, for getting these shows together and getting these beautiful graphics together. So hopefully you enjoyed the content. We'll be here with you all later this week. Let's go Mets.
There you go, guys. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And remember, guys, we're here for all the news and rumors throughout the off season, and that's why we're doing this Mets Hot Stuff show. Hopefully twice a week, maybe 3 times a week, or maybe even more when the rumors start really getting heated up here. So hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button as well. With that said, guys, have a great night. As always, Met fans, let's go Mets, and enjoy the rest of your week, guys. We'll see you next time on the Mets Hot Stuff show. Have a good night, guys. Let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.
Dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene.